All right, let's get going with automation. Um, so, to automate something is like anything, a conveyor belt, automating an auto factory, automating making a cup of espresso, anything that we can take the need to control something manually by our own hands or mouse in this instance is a really cool thing. So, what we're going to do is learn how to automate volume and panning. I have two tracks here, one mono and one stereo, because there are some differences that are worth explaining and exploring. I have expand inserted on both of them, and on both of those tracks, I have the soft lead called Storytel inserted. Um, Very quickly, I'm going to get into my MIDI editor, and I am going to draw a 4-measure note on C3, which I'd like you to do. All right, 4 measures. It doesn't. I don't really care what sound you use, except that I want it to have sustain. So I want it to last that 4 measures. I'm going to duplicate that note. Okay, so I have two 4-measure clips. In fact, I am going to copy them by clicking Option, clicking with my grabber tool, and bring them both down to the second track as well. But I'm going to mute that one for now. All right, so automation. If you click on this little show or hide automation lanes square on the bottom left-hand corner of your track, it reveals what's called the automation lane, and initially it shows you velocity. Those lollipops that represent how hard the note is being hit. If you click on the word velocity, you see a whole host of parameters that can be controlled through automation. We're only going to be talking about audio volume and audio panning. Audio mute should become fairly obvious once you understand the concept. It's just going to turn your track on and off when you want it to go on and off. So let's start with volume. Now, when I choose volume, this line is revealed, and it should seem familiar, at least based on how we used the master fader. So this is the volume of the track, and it represents or is related to the placement of this fader. So if I move this down, the fader is down. If I move it back up, the fader goes back up. Remember that 0 is unity gain, and therefore that is kind of where we want to leave our volume as a starting point, at least for this. And typically, I want to be careful not to go up to the top of the lane, because that is actually 12 decibels above 0. So that would be quite loud. All right, so using my grabber tool, I'm going to maintain the smart tool because I want everyone to get used to that. When I use the smart tool, I actually have to click Command and click to place an anchor point. So I don't need to do that if I choose the grabber on its own. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag this down all the way down to silence over the course of the first measure. And then I'm going to come up here and I'm going to come back to 0 or so, okay? Plus 0.2, I'm not that worried about, but please don't go up to plus 12. It'll blow my speakers out in my ears. And I'm going to do this again for the next 2 measures, and I'm going to come back to about 0. All right, so now the volume for the second clip remains where it's at. So what does this sound like? Volume going down, volume coming up. Watch, what does it look like? Volume going down, volume coming up. So that is used all the time for, automating a vocal, for example, or any instrument for that fact matter. When you're mixing and you're trying to think through, like, I can't hear that word. So you might go in and just bring that volume up for that word or that phrase. Clicking on the pencil, you can definitely draw in automation so it is a little bit smoother in its movement. Oh, why did I delete my track? I didn't mean to do that, or my clip. All right, let me just get rid of the automation. You just highlight the anchor points and it's done. So let me do this again with my pencil tool. Okay, so I can draw in some very radical but smooth. Okay, so imagine a song that might have a very quiet verse compared to the chorus and the vocals, and we just want to make some adjustments. So this is what I want you to have. I just want you to have some very clear up and down volume control. The next one we're going to click on, so I'm going to click the plus sign so we can see both of them. Not audio mute, but audio panning. And panning is referring to the knob and therefore where the sound goes in between your ears. I'm not going to do anything to the first clip because this is all about volume. So I'm going to operate over here. Notice that the line is in the center because our panning knob is in the center. And up above, you see the L, so that's left, and down below is right. And what we're going to do is I'm going to actually move the entire, actually I'm going to start here. So I'm going to leave this all alone and leave it as volume. So I put an anchor point right at measure 5, and I'm going to bring another anchor point straight up above it so that this second clip at measure 5 starts completely in my left ear. Hopefully that translates. And then over the course of the next measure, I'm going to go all the way to my right ear, all the way back to my left ear, and so on and so forth. But the volume's going to stay steady. All right, and what I want you to do is then highlight both of these, bounce them out as an MP3 is fine. Auto, MP3 interleaved and offline, and submit that to Canvas for me. Now I do want to go over something, and this will be kind of in the Edpuzzle. I want to go over the difference when we're talking about stereo. And really the only thing that I need to talk about, because volume looks exactly the same, I want to talk about what panning looks like. So if you wanted to pan a stereo sound that goes all the way back and forth the same way that we just did that, you would need to choose all pan types. That didn't work too well. And you'll see that there's actually 2 lanes. There's 1 lane for the left and 1 lane for the right. If you remember, Pro Tools on stereo tracks, you actually have individual control over those 2 panning knobs. So if I wanted it to go similarly to this with left, right, I need to actually pull the right side all the way to the left, which looks like this, and do the same thing by dragging both sides. So what happens to the left needs to happen to the right, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to bring that one back to the center so you can kind of get that whole idea. And we'll watch it and we'll listen to it. Interesting. How can I have a CPU overload with literally 1 track? Awesome. Let's try one more time, and we will force it to work. Okay, so in the context of our projects, if you think about, a long howl or scream that's long that can kind of move across the ears, or some footsteps that move across the ears that actually sound like movement. All right, one last thing. So we did this all through the automation lane dropdown, but you can also come to where it says clips view, and you can also see your volume and or your panning. And this is true for audio tracks or instrument tracks. I kind of tend to like to work with the automation lane myself, but when dealing with an audio track, let me actually reveal an audio track real quick. I find it really useful to bring up the panning, or I should say the volume. I don't really do panning this way, because you can really see where you are putting that volume in. Again, if I'm using this the pencil tool, I can say I just really want to follow that word right there, or that, in this instance, a heartbeat. Okay. So you can use the view on each track, but by only being able to control the left side, I actually find that rather not so useful, given the panning situation. If it were a mono track, that'd be one thing, because remember, a mono track is simply going to be in the center, and you don't need to worry about two tracks like that, or two sides. All right, so automated panning, automated volume. Please don't forget to submit that 2-measure or that 8-measure clip of audio with automated volume and automated panning.